A Werewolf Shifter Romance, written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1. The Flowers That Never Bloomed. The scent of lilies filled the small bridal suite, their white petals pristine and mocking. Elena Hartwell stared at her reflection in the ornate mirror, her hands trembling as she adjusted the delicate lace veil that had belonged to her grandmother. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Instead, it felt like she was preparing for her own funeral. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," her mother whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. Margaret Hartwell's voice carried the weight of years spent hiding from their past, her once proud posture now permanently curved with shame. Elena could smell the underlying anxiety radiating from her, a remnant of her weakened shifter genes that had never fully manifested since the exile. Elena forced a smile, though it felt like shattered glass against her lips. At 24, she had convinced herself that marrying David Morrison, a kind human businessman with no knowledge of the supernatural world, would finally give her the normal life she desperately craved. No more whispered conversations about her family's shameful past. No more pitying looks from the shifter community that had rejected her years ago. No more nights spent wondering why she felt so fundamentally different from everyone around her. The memory crashed over her like a brutal wave, as vivid and painful as the day it happened. 8 years ago, at 16, she had stood in front of Marcus Blackthorne and his family, believing she was about to be accepted as his intended mate. The Blackthorne pack had been prestigious, their bloodline ancient and pure. Her parents had been so proud, so hopeful that this union would restore their family's honor. Instead, Marcus's words had shattered her world. "I cannot bind myself to a weak bloodline. She carries the shame of her father's banishment. She is barely more than human, a disgrace to our kind. I reject this bond completely." The rejection had been public, humiliating, and absolute. Her father, once a respected beta in the Crescent Moon Pack, had been exiled for reasons no one would explain to her. Even now, when she begged for answers, her parents would only exchange meaningful glances and change the subject. Her mother had never shifted again after that day, the shame breaking something fundamental inside her wolf. "Elena, it's time," her cousin Sarah announced from the doorway, her smile bright but forced. Sarah was one of the few family members who had maintained contact after their disgrace, though even she seemed uncomfortable around Elena's persistent questions about their family's past. The walk to the church felt like a death march. Elena's bouquet of white roses and baby's breath trembled in her grip as autumn wind whipped through her carefully styled hair. The small chapel sat nestled between towering oak trees, their leaves already beginning to turn the deep gold and crimson of the season. The church was small but elegant, filled with David's family and friends. Elena's side was noticeably sparse, a few distant relatives who had maintained contact after her family's disgrace, some co-workers from the flower shop where she worked, and her parents sitting in the front row with carefully neutral expressions. As she walked down the aisle, her heart hammered against her ribs with each step. David stood at the altar, handsome in his black tuxedo, but something in his expression made her steps falter. His usual warm smile was absent, replaced by a cold mask that she had never seen before. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, his voice echoing through the chapel. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of David Morrison and Elena Hartwell in holy matrimony. Marriage is a sacred covenant, not to be entered into lightly, but with reverence and commitment." Elena tried to focus on the familiar words, but a strange sensation prickled along her spine like electricity dancing across her skin. She felt watched, studied by unseen eyes that seemed to pierce through her carefully constructed facade. The feeling was familiar, yet impossible to place, like a half-remembered dream that lingered just beyond consciousness. Her gaze flickered toward the stained glass windows, searching for the source of her unease. Through the colored glass, she caught a glimpse of movement in the tree line, a shadow that seemed too large and too purposeful to be natural. But when she looked again, there was nothing. "If anyone objects to this union," the minister continued, his weathered hands gripping the leather-bound Bible, "speak now or forever. Hold your peace." The silence stretched for a heartbeat too long. David's hand was cold in hers, his palm sweating despite the autumn chill that had settled over the small town. When she looked up at him, searching for reassurance, She found something that made her blood freeze in her veins. "I'm sorry, Elena," David whispered, his voice barely audible but carrying clearly in the hushed church. "I can't do this. I know what you are now. What your family did. I can't marry into that world." The church erupted in confused murmurs, voices rising like a swarm of agitated bees. Elena felt the world tilt beneath her feet, her vision swimming as if she were underwater. "David, what are you talking about? What world? I don't understand." He released her hands abruptly, stepping backward as if she had become something venomous. "Someone showed me the records from the supernatural registry. Your father was exiled for treason against the Shifter Council. Your bloodline is cursed, marked for something terrible. I won't risk my future children being born into that legacy." The humiliation was a physical blow that stole the breath from her lungs. Elena's vision blurred as she watched David walk down the aisle with quick, desperate steps, leaving her standing alone at the altar in her white dress that suddenly felt like a shroud. The whispers of the congregation buzzed around her like angry wasps, their voices mixing into an incomprehensible roar of judgment and pity. "Not again," she breathed, the words torn from her throat like pieces of her soul. "Please, God, not again." She gathered her skirts and ran, ignoring her mother's desperate calls and her father's broken expression. The church doors slammed behind her as she plunged into the forest that bordered the small town cemetery. Her heels caught in the soft earth, and she kicked them off, running barefoot through the underbrush as thorns tore at her dress and exposed skin. The woods seemed to close around her like protective arms, offering shelter from the nightmare her life had become twice over. Ancient trees towered overhead, their branches creating a canopy that filtered the afternoon sunlight into dappled patterns on the forest floor. She ran until her lungs burned, and her legs gave out, collapsing beside a fallen log as sobs racked her body. "Why?" she whispered to the empty forest, her voice breaking on the word. "What did I do to deserve this? What curse follows me?" As darkness crept through the trees and her wedding dress grew damp with tears and forest dew, Elena felt consciousness slipping away. The emotional trauma, combined with the physical exertion, was too much for her human weak constitution. Her last coherent thought was the strange certainty that she was not alone in these woods, that something powerful and ancient was watching her with golden eyes. From the shadows between the ancient oaks, those very eyes observed her fall. Kyle Thornwood remained motionless until her breathing steadied into unconsciousness, then stepped forward with predatory grace, his massive frame moving with surprising silence through the underbrush. He had been watching Elena Hartwell for 7 years, ever since he had found her broken and bleeding on a mountain road after Marcus Blackthorn's public rejection. She had been unconscious then, too, her young body unable to handle the severing of what should have been a mate bond. He had healed her injuries with his alpha abilities and ensured her safe return home, but something about her had haunted him ever since. Now, as he gathered her unconscious form into his arms, the same inexplicable protectiveness surged through him like wildfire. She was more than she appeared to be. He could sense it in the way his wolf responded to her presence, the way the forest itself seemed to bend toward her unconscious form. "Foolish little flower," he murmured against her hair, breathing in her unique scent of wildflowers and moonlight. "You have no idea what you truly are, do you?" As the alpha of the Shadow Pine Pack carried Elena deeper into his territory, neither of them realized that this moment would change everything. The abandoned bride was about to discover that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the deepest wounds, and that fate has a way of bringing together two souls who were always meant to find each other. Chapter 2. Eyes Like Golden Fire. Elena's consciousness returned slowly, like surfacing from deep, dark water. The first thing she noticed was warmth, blessed, enveloping heat that seemed to seep into her bones. The second was the scent surrounding her. Pine, wood smoke, and something distinctly masculine that made her wolf-weak senses tingle with unfamiliar awareness. Her eyes fluttered open to find herself lying on a leather couch in front of a crackling fireplace. The room was rustic, but comfortable, with wooden beams stretching across the ceiling and hand-woven rugs scattered across polished hardwood floors. Through tall windows, she could see dense forest stretching in every direction, with no sign of civilization. "You're awake." The voice was deep, resonant, and carried an undertone of command that made every nerve in her body stand at attention. Elena sat up quickly, too quickly, and immediately regretted it as her head spun. She was still wearing her wedding dress, though someone had removed her torn stockings and cleaned the dirt from her feet. A soft blanket had been draped over her shoulders. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice hoarse from crying. She turned toward the voice and froze. The man standing in the doorway was unlike anyone she had ever seen. Tall and powerfully built, he moved with the fluid grace of a predator. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and his features were sharp and aristocratic. But it was his eyes that stole her breath, golden amber that seemed to glow in the firelight, ancient and knowing in a way that made her feel utterly exposed. "My home," he replied simply, stepping into the room. "You collapsed in my territory. I brought you here until you recovered." Something about his presence made her skin prickle with recognition, though she was certain they had never met. The air around him seemed to vibrate with barely contained power, and her weak shifter senses screamed a warning that made her pulse quicken. "You're an alpha," she whispered, scrambling to stand. The blanket fell away as she backed toward the window, her wedding dress rustling with each movement. "I need to leave. I can't be here." His golden eyes tracked her movement, but he made no move to stop her retreat. "The storm outside says otherwise. It's been raging for hours, trees down across all the roads. You won't make it half a mile in this weather." As if summoned by his words, thunder crashed overhead, and rain lashed against the windows with renewed fury. Elena glanced outside and saw nothing but a wall of water and wind that turned the forest into a gray, impenetrable maze. "I don't care," she said, moving toward what she hoped was the front door. "I won't be trapped here with someone like you. I know what alphas do to females like me." Something flickered across his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or hurt. "Someone like you? Weak, rejected, cursed." The words tasted bitter on her tongue. "I'm not Pack. I'm not even a proper shifter. I'm nothing you'd want." He was silent for a long moment, studying her with those unsettling golden eyes. When he spoke, his voice was gentler than before. "My name is Cale Thornwood. I'm the alpha of the Shadowpine Pack. And you're Elena Hartwell, daughter of Samuel Hartwell, former beta of the Crescent Moon Pack." Her blood turned to ice. "How do you know my father's name? How do you know who I am?" Cale moved closer, and she pressed her back against the window, feeling the cold glass through her dress. "Because I've been watching over you for 7 years, little flower, making sure you stayed safe." "Watching me?" The words came out as a squeak. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." "I know more than you think." His voice carried a weight of memory, of old pain carefully hidden. "I know that Marcus Blackthorn rejected you publicly when you were 16. I know that your family was exiled for reasons you've never been told. I know that you work at Petals and Thorn's flower shop, that you live in the small apartment above it, and that you've spent the last 8 years trying to build a normal human life." Elena's knees threatened to give out. "You've been stalking me?" "Protecting you," he corrected, his tone firm. "There are things about your bloodline, about what you are, that make you valuable to certain unsavory individuals. I've made sure they never found you." "What I am," she laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "I'm nobody. I'm the weakest excuse for a shifter that ever lived. I can't even shift, can barely sense other supernaturals unless they're right in front of me. I'm worthless." Something dangerous flashed in Cale's eyes, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Who told you that?" The alpha command in his voice was unmistakable now, pressing against her consciousness like a physical weight. Elena found herself answering before she could stop herself. "Everyone. My parents, Marcus, the Pack Elders. They all said I was a disappointment to the bloodline. They lied." The words were spoken with such conviction that Elena almost believed them. "Your father wasn't exiled for treason, Elena. He was banished because he refused to give you up." "Give me up to whom?" Cal was close enough now that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. His scent surrounded her, making her feel dizzy and confused. "The Council of Ancients. They wanted to study you, to understand what you are. Your father knew what that would mean, a lifetime of captivity, of being treated like a laboratory specimen. So he chose exile instead. Elena shook her head violently. You're lying. You have to be lying. I'm nothing special. I'm just a failed shifter. Look at me, Kyle commanded, his voice dropping to a rumble that vibrated through her chest. Really look at me, and tell me what you see. Against her better judgment, Elena met his gaze. Those golden eyes seemed to pull her in, and for a moment, she felt something stir deep inside her, a recognition that went beyond the physical, beyond the rational. Her skin tingled where his breath touched her cheek, and she caught herself leaning toward him before jerking back. I see an alpha who's probably going to reject me just like everyone else, she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Kyle's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. I've been waiting 7 years for you to be ready to hear the truth. 7 years of watching from the shadows, making sure you were safe, hoping that someday you'd let me explain. Explain what? Why the moon goddess brought me to that mountain road the night Marcus rejected you. Why my wolf has recognized you as mine since the moment I scented your blood. Why I've never been able to claim another mate, no matter how much my pack needs a Luna. Elena's world tilted on its axis. That's impossible. You don't know me. I can't be my mate, Kyle finished softly. The bond doesn't lie, little flower. It's been there all along, waiting for you to be strong enough to feel it. As if responding to his words, something deep in Elena's chest began to warm, unfurling like a flower in sunlight. For just a moment, she felt it. A golden thread connecting her heart to his, pulsing with possibility and ancient magic. Then reality crashed back, and she pushed away from him, stumbling toward the center of the room. No, this is some kind of alpha trick. You're trying to manipulate me when I'm vulnerable. Kyle's expression hardened, his control slipping enough that his eyes flashed with inner fire. I have never used alpha compulsion on you, Elena. Not once in 7 years. Everything you're feeling is real. Nothing about this is real, she shouted, her voice breaking. Real would be David keeping his promises. Real would be my parents telling me the truth. Real would be someone wanting me for who I am, not for whatever mysterious thing you think I am. Thunder crashed overhead again, and the lights flickered. In the brief moment of near darkness, Elena could have sworn she saw Kale's human facade slip, revealing something wild and primal underneath. When the light steadied, he was watching her with an expression of infinite patience and barely leashed hunger that made her pulse race for entirely different reasons. The storm isn't going anywhere tonight, he said quietly. Neither are you, but I won't force you to listen to me, and I won't use my alpha authority to make you stay in this room. The guest bedroom is upstairs, first door on the right. There's food in the kitchen if you're hungry. He moved toward the door, then paused. But Elena, running from the truth won't make it disappear. Eventually, you're going to have to face what you are. As he left her alone with the fire and her racing thoughts, Elena sank onto the couch and buried her face in her hands. Everything she thought she knew about her life was crumbling around her, and the only person offering answers was an alpha, whose very presence made her feel things she didn't understand. Outside, the storm raged on, trapping her in a cabin with a man who claimed she was his mate, and secrets that might finally explain why she had never felt like she belonged anywhere. The fire crackled in the hearth, and Elena found herself staring into the flames, wondering if she was brave enough to hear the truth. Chapter 3. The Healing Touch. The storm had trapped them for 3 days now, and Elena was beginning to understand that fate had a cruel sense of humor. She had tried to maintain distance from Kyle, taking her meals in the kitchen when he was elsewhere, retreating to the guest room whenever his presence became too overwhelming. But the cabin wasn't large enough to avoid him completely, and she found herself drawn into conversations despite her better judgment. On the second morning, she had discovered him in the kitchen nursing a cup of coffee, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled. Dark circles shadowed his golden eyes, and there was a tension in his shoulders that spoke of sleepless nights. You look terrible, she had said before thinking better of it. He'd glanced up with a wry smile. Alphas don't sleep well when there's a storm. Too many pack members to worry about. Too many variables to consider. Is that why you keep checking your phone? She'd noticed him stepping outside repeatedly to make calls. his voice carrying the authoritative tone of someone managing a crisis. 3 trees down across our main territory roads. 2 of my pack members' homes flooded, and a pregnant female who's overdue and can't get to the hospital. He'd rubbed his temples, the gesture so human and vulnerable that Elena's heart had clenched unexpectedly. Without thinking, she'd moved closer. Here, let me. Her hands had found his temples before she could second-guess herself, her fingers pressing gently against the tension points. The moment her skin touched his, warmth had flowed from her palms, and she'd watched in amazement as the stress lines around his eyes softened. Cale had gone very still beneath her touch. "Elena," he'd breathed, his voice rough with something that might have been wonder. "How are you doing that?" She jerked her hands away, startled. "Doing what? I don't know. You looked like you were in pain. The headache is completely gone." His golden eyes had searched her face intently. "You have healing abilities. That's incredibly rare, even among full-blooded shifters." "I don't have any abilities," she'd protested, but her hands had tingled with residual warmth that suggested otherwise. Now, on the 3rd day, Elena found herself watching Kyle more carefully. He moved through the cabin with unconscious grace, but she'd begun to notice the small signs of discomfort he tried to hide. The way he favored his left shoulder when he thought she wasn't looking, the careful way he flexed his right hand. "You're injured," she said suddenly, looking up from the book she'd been pretending to read by the fireplace. Cale paused in the doorway, a stack of firewood in his arms. "It's nothing serious." "Occupational hazard of being an alpha." "What happened?" He seemed to debate whether to answer, then sighed. "Yesterday, when I went to check on the flooding in the Eastern Territory, I had to move some debris that had trapped one of my pack members. My wolf is strong, but even we have limits." Elena set down her book and stood. "Let me see." "Elena, please." The word came out softer than she'd intended. "You've been taking care of me for 3 days. Let me help." After a moment's hesitation, Cale set down the firewood and slowly pulled off his flannel shirt. Elena's breath caught in her throat. His chest and shoulders were sculpted muscle and golden skin, but ugly purple bruises marred his left side, and she could see the swelling around his ribs. "That looks painful," she murmured, moving closer despite the voice in her head warning her to keep her distance. "It's healing. Shifters recover quickly, not quickly enough." Without giving herself time to think, Elena placed her palms against his injured ribs. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Heat flowed from her hands like liquid sunlight, and she could feel something deep inside her awakening, a power she'd never known she possessed. Under her touch, the bruises began to fade, the swelling receding as damaged tissue repaired itself at an impossible rate. But it wasn't just the physical healing that stunned her. The moment her skin made contact with his, she felt something else, a connection that went soul deep, as if invisible threads were weaving themselves between their hearts. She could sense his emotions, surprise, gratitude, and underneath it all, a longing so intense it took her breath away. "Elena," her name was a prayer on his lips. "Look at me." She raised her eyes to meet his, and what she saw there made her knees weak. There was no mask now, no careful alpha control, just raw, honest desire mixed with something that looked dangerously like love. "I can feel you," she whispered, her hands still pressed against his chest. "In my mind, in my heart. How is that possible?" "It's the mate bond," Cale said softly, his own hands coming up to cover hers. "It's been there all along. But you've never been open enough to feel it before." The connection between them pulsed stronger, and Elena gasped as foreign emotions flooded through her. His emotions. She felt his fierce protectiveness, his years of lonely watching, his desperate hope that she might someday accept what lay between them. "This is terrifying," she admitted, but she didn't pull away. "I know." His thumb traced over her knuckles. "But you're not alone in it. I've been feeling this for 7 years, Elena. The pull toward you, the need to protect you, the certainty that you're the other half of my soul." Why didn't you approach me sooner? Why watch from the shadows?" Pain flickered across his features. "Because I knew what everyone had told you about yourself. I knew you believed you were weak, unwanted. How could I burden you with a mate bond when you were still healing from Marcus's rejection? You needed time to find your own strength first. Elena studied his face, seeing the truth in his golden eyes. You were protecting me even from yourself. I was trying to. Though I'll admit, there were times when my control nearly snapped. When Marcus came sniffing around your flower shop last year, when that human male at the grocery store asked you out, when David first started courting you, his jaw clenched. My wolf wanted to claim you publicly. Consequences be damned. But you didn't, because you deserved the choice. You deserved to come to me freely, not because I overwhelmed you with alpha dominance. His hands tightened over hers. Though I'll confess, watching you walk down that aisle toward another man nearly killed me. Elena's heart clenched. You were at the church? I've been watching over you for 7 years, little flower. Did you think I'd miss the most important day of your life, even if it was breaking my heart? The rawness in his voice made her chest tight with emotion. Kyle, when David abandoned you, when you ran into the forest in that beautiful dress with tears streaming down your face, every instinct I had screamed at me to hunt him down and tear him apart for hurting you. Why didn't you? Because you needed comfort more than you needed vengeance. And because I knew that if I shifted in that moment, if I let my wolf take control, I might not have been able to stop myself from claiming you whether you were ready or not. The healing warmth under her palms had faded, but the connection between them remained strong and steady. Elena could feel his wolf now, could sense the powerful predator that lived just beneath his human skin. It should have frightened her. Instead, she felt oddly safe, as if that fierce creature would die before allowing harm to come to her. I can sense your wolf, she said in wonder, and I can sense yours, even though you've never shifted. She's there, Elena, sleeping deep inside you. She's been waiting for the right moment to wake up. I don't understand any of this. If I'm really your mate, if I have these abilities, why has everyone always told me I was weak? Kale's expression darkened. Because certain people have reasons for wanting you to believe that. Your bloodline carries something rare and precious, something that others would kill to possess. Your father knew this, and he spent the last 16 years hiding you from those who would use you. What do I have that's so valuable? The ability to heal, for one. But that's just the beginning. The reason the Council of Ancients wanted you, the reason Marcus rejected you to keep you hidden, the reason your parents have never told you the truth about your heritage. He paused, studying her face carefully. Elena, you're not just a shifter. You're something much rarer. What am I? Before Kale could answer, his phone buzzed urgently. He glanced at it and cursed under his breath. The pregnant female I mentioned. She's going into labor. The roads are still impassable, and she can't get to the hospital. Elena's hands fell away from his chest as he reached for his shirt. What are you going to do? I have to go to her. Lila's mate died 6 months ago, and she has no family nearby. She's part of my pack, which makes her my responsibility. In this storm, the roads are flooded. I can get there in wolf form, following the high ground through the forest. But she'll need medical attention, and the pack doctor is stuck on the other side of the territory. Elena made a decision that surprised them both. Take me with you. Kyle froze in the act of buttoning his shirt. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. I can help her, Elena said, her voice growing stronger with conviction. If I really have healing abilities, if that's what I just did for you, then she needs me. Elena, you don't understand what you're suggesting. Shifting territory in this weather, helping with a birth, I'm suggesting that maybe it's time I stopped running from what I am and started embracing it. She met his golden gaze steadily. You said I needed to find my own strength. Well, maybe this is how I do it. Kyle stared at her for a long moment, and she could feel his internal struggle through their newfound connection. Finally, he nodded slowly. If we do this, you stay exactly where I tell you to stay. You don't argue with my commands, and if I say run, you run. Understood? Elena's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Understood. As Kale finished dressing and gathered supplies, Elena realized that something fundamental had shifted between them. The frightened, broken woman who had collapsed in the forest 3 days ago was gone. In her place stood someone who was finally ready to discover what she was truly capable of. The storm still raged outside, but Elena was no longer afraid of it. She was ready to face whatever waited in the darkness, with the golden-eyed Alpha who had been watching over her all along. Chapter 4. In the heart of the storm. The journey to Lila's cabin was unlike anything Elena had ever experienced. Kyle had insisted she ride on his back in wolf form, and the moment she'd seen him shift, her breath had caught in her throat. His wolf was magnificent, larger than any she'd ever glimpsed, with thick black fur and those same golden eyes that seemed to glow in the storm-darkened forest. Now, clinging to his powerful frame as he navigated fallen trees and rushing streams, Elena felt the raw power beneath her. Each leap over obstacles sent her heart racing, but not with fear. Instead, she felt exhilarated, alive in a way she'd never experienced before. The bond between them pulsed stronger with each mile, and she could sense his thoughts, his concern for Lila, his awareness of Elena's every breath, his fierce determination to keep her safe. When they reached the small cabin nestled in a grove of pine trees, Elena could hear Lila's labored breathing even before Kale shifted back to human form. The young woman was alone, her face pale with pain and exhaustion, dark hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. "Alpha," Lila gasped as Kale entered, Elena close behind. "Thank the moon goddess you're here. Something's wrong. The baby. It's too early, and the pain is different than it should be." Elena moved to Lila's side instinctively, her hands hovering over the swollen belly. The moment she made contact, she gasped. The cord is wrapped around the baby's neck. That's why the labor is stalling. Both Kale and Lila stared at her in shock. "How could you possibly know that?" Lila whispered. Elena looked down at her hands in amazement. She could sense it somehow. The baby's distress, the dangerous positioning, the urgent need for intervention. "I can feel it. The baby's heartbeat is irregular and there's pressure where there shouldn't be." Kyle moved to Elena's other side, his voice carefully controlled. "Can you help her?" "I think so." Elena's hands began to warm against Lila's skin. "But I've never done anything like this before. What if I make it worse?" "You won't," Kale said with absolute certainty. "Trust your instincts, little flower. Trust what you're feeling." Elena closed her eyes and let the healing warmth flow from her palms. She could sense the baby now, could feel its tiny spirit struggling against the cord that threatened its life. Gently, carefully, she guided the energy toward the problem, visualizing the cord loosening, the baby turning into a safer position. "Oh," Lila breathed, her eyes widening. "I can feel something's different." The pressure is easing. For the next hour, Elena worked with an intuition she didn't understand, but trusted completely. Kale assisted, his strong hands supporting Lila, his calm presence steadying both women as the labor progressed. Elena found herself giving instructions she shouldn't have known: when to push, when to breathe, how to position herself for the safest delivery. "The baby's crowning," Elena announced, wonder filling her voice. "One more push, Lila. You're almost there." With a final cry of effort, Lila delivered a perfect baby girl into Elena's waiting hands. The infant's first wail filled the cabin, strong and healthy, and Elena felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she placed the baby on her mother's chest. "She's beautiful," Lila sobbed, cradling her daughter. "Perfect. Thank you, Elena. Thank you both." As Elena cleaned up and ensured both mother and baby were stable, she became aware of Kale watching her with an expression of awe and something deeper. When they finally stepped outside for a moment of air, he pulled her into his arms without warning. "That was incredible," he murmured against her hair. "You saved them both. A doctor couldn't have done better." Elena pulled back to look at him, her heart racing from more than just the adrenaline of the delivery. "I could feel everything, Kale. The baby's heartbeat, where the cord was wrapped, exactly what needed to happen. How is that possible? Because you're not just a healer, Elena. You're something the shifter world hasn't seen in generations." His golden eyes burned with intensity. "You're a moonborn, a child blessed by the moon goddess herself. with abilities that go far beyond normal shifter traits. A Moonborn? The word felt strange on her tongue, but something deep inside her recognized its truth. It's why the council wanted you, why your father chose exile rather than give you up. Moonborns are incredibly rare and incredibly powerful. Your bloodline traces back to the first wolves blessed by the goddess herself. Elena felt the world tilt again. But this time it wasn't with fear. It was with the overwhelming realization that everything she'd believed about herself had been a lie designed to protect her. My parents knew. They've known since you were born. The signs were there. Your unusual scent. The way animals are drawn to you. Your inability to shift because your wolf is so powerful, it needs specific conditions to emerge safely. What conditions? Kyle's hands framed her face gently. A true mate bond. Love, acceptance, and the feeling of absolute safety. Your wolf has been waiting for you to find where you belong before she reveals herself. The storm was beginning to clear overhead, moonlight filtering through the breaking clouds. As it touched Elena's skin, she felt something stir deep inside her, a presence she'd always sensed but never understood. I can feel her, Elena whispered in amazement. My wolf. She's there. She's been waiting for you to be ready, Kyle said softly, just like I have. Before Elena could respond, her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and froze, her blood turning to ice. What is it? Kale asked, immediately alert to her distress. Elena held up the phone with shaking hands. The message was from an unknown number. Congratulations on your engagement, Elena. Such a shame about the wedding. Don't worry. Marcus Blackthorn knows how to treat a Moonborn properly. We'll be in touch soon. A friend. Kale's expression darkened dangerously, his eyes flashing gold. Marcus knows what you are. How is that possible? I just found out myself. Someone's been watching you, feeding him information. Someone who knew about tonight. About what you accomplished here. His jaw clenched. This isn't random, Elena. Marcus has been planning this. Fear clawed at Elena's chest. Planning what? To claim you for himself. If he can prove to the council that you're a Moonborn and that I've been hiding you, he can petition for the right to take you as his mate by force. Ancient law allows an alpha to claim an unmated Moonborn for the good of all shifter kind. But we're bonded, Elena protested. I can feel the connection between us. A bond isn't the same as a claiming, Kale said grimly. Until we complete the mating ritual under the full moon, until you officially accept me as your mate, that bond can be legally challenged. Another text arrived. The full moon is in 3 days, darling. I do hope you'll consider my offer before then. It would be such a shame if something happened to your dear alpha friend. Marcus sends his regards. Elena's hands shook as she read the message aloud. He's threatening you. Let him try, Kale growled, his alpha power crackling in the air around them. I've been protecting you for 7 years, and I'm not about to stop now. But if he knows about the Moonborn thing, if he can use ancient law, then we make sure the claiming happens before he can interfere. Kale's golden eyes met hers intensely. Elena, I need you to understand what I'm asking. A claiming ritual is permanent, binding for life. If you accept me as your mate, there's no going back. Elena's heart pounded as she looked at this incredible man who had watched over her from the shadows, who had waited patiently for her to find her strength, who had just helped her save a life and discover abilities she'd never dreamed she possessed. 3 days ago, I thought I was a failed shifter marrying a human man who didn't truly know me, she said, slowly. Now I find out I'm something called a Moonborn. I have healing powers, and the most powerful alpha I've ever met wants to claim me as his mate. I know it's overwhelming. It is, Elena agreed. But for the first time in my life, I feel like I know who I'm supposed to be. When I was helping Lila, when I was using those abilities, I felt complete, like all the pieces of myself were finally fitting together. Kyle stepped closer, his warmth surrounding her. And how do you feel about me? About us? Elena reached up to touch his face, marveling at how right it felt to have her skin against his. I feel like I've been waiting my whole life to find you, even when I didn't know that's what I was doing. I feel like every rejection, Every moment of feeling lost and unwanted was just preparing me to recognize what real love feels like. Elena. He breathed, his voice rough with emotion. I want to do the claiming ritual, Kale. I want to be your mate, your Luna, whatever that means for someone like me. But I need to know that you're choosing me for who I am, not just because I'm some rare moonborn. Little flower, he said, pulling her closer until their foreheads touched. I fell for you 7 years ago, when you were just a broken 16-year-old girl with more courage than she knew what to do with. Everything I've learned about your abilities, your heritage, your power, that's just made me prouder to call you mine. The moon broke fully through the clouds overhead, bathing them in silver light. As it touched Elena's skin, she felt her wolf stir more strongly than ever before, and for just a moment she caught a glimpse of golden eyes that mirrored Kale's. 3 days, she said firmly. We have 3 days to figure out how to do this safely, how to protect your pack, and how to make sure Marcus can never threaten either of us again. Kale smiled, and it was full of fierce pride and deadly promise. 3 days to show you exactly what it means to be the mate of the Shadowpine Alpha. As they headed back inside to check on Lila and her baby, Elena felt a strength building inside her that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with finally understanding her place in the world. She was done running from who she was meant to be. It was time to claim her destiny, and the golden-eyed Alpha who came with it. Chapter 5. Blood and Moonlight. The next morning brought devastating news that shattered the fragile peace Elena had found. She woke in Kale's arms. They had returned to his cabin after ensuring Lila and her baby were safe, and exhaustion had claimed them both on the couch by the fire. The intimacy of sleeping against his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath her cheek, had felt natural and right. Until his phone rang at dawn, with news that changed everything. What do you mean she's gone? Kale's voice was deadly quiet as he spoke to his beta, but Elena could feel his rage through their bond like a physical burn. She sat up, instantly alert. What's happened? Kale's golden eyes were molten with fury when he looked at her. Lila and her baby have been taken. My beta found her cabin empty, signs of a struggle and this. He held up his phone, showing a message that made Elena's blood freeze. Consider this a demonstration of how serious I am about my claim. The Moonborn will come to me willingly, or more innocents will suffer. You have until moonrise tonight to bring her to the old Blackthorn territory. Come alone, or the new mother and her child will pay the price for your defiance. Marcus. Elena's hands shook as she read the words. He took a newborn baby. How could he do something so monstrous? Because Marcus Blackthorn stopped being human the day he decided power mattered more than honor. Kale snarled, already moving toward his weapons cabinet. But he's made a fatal mistake. He's threatened my pack member and her child. That's an act of war. You can't go, Elena said urgently, grabbing his arm. It's obviously a trap. He wants you dead and me captured. I know it's a trap. Kale's voice was grim as he loaded silver ammunition into a modified rifle. But I can't leave Lila and her baby in his hands. Do you know what someone like Marcus would do to a defenseless infant? Elena's heart clenched, but she forced herself to think clearly. Then we do this my way. Together. Absolutely not. I won't risk you. Kyle, listen to me. She moved to stand in front of him, her hands on his chest. You said yourself that I'm a Moonborn, that I have abilities beyond normal shifters. What if that's exactly what we need right now? His jaw tightened. Elena, you've only just discovered these powers. You don't know how to control them, how to use them in a fight. Then teach me. Her voice was steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. We have all day. Use our bond. Show me what I need to know. Kale stared at her for a long moment, and she could feel his internal war through their connection. Finally, he closed his eyes and nodded. If we do this, you follow my lead completely. No heroics, no taking unnecessary risks. Agreed. For the next several hours, Kale pushed Elena harder than she'd ever been pushed in her life. Using their mate bond as a conduit, he shared knowledge directly with her mind. How to sense other shifters' locations, how to shield her thoughts from mental intrusion, how to channel her healing abilities into defensive barriers. Moonborns were warriors before they were healers, he explained as she practiced projecting energy shields. Your bloodline includes some of the fiercest fighters the shifter world has ever known. Elena felt the truth of his words as power flowed through her, silver light dancing around her fingers. For the first time in her life, she felt truly strong, truly capable of protecting what mattered to her. But it was the final lesson that changed everything. "There's something else," Kale said, as afternoon shadows lengthened. "Something about your heritage that I haven't told you yet." Elena looked up from the meditation pose he'd taught her. "What?" "Moonborns don't just have enhanced abilities. Under the right circumstances, with the right emotional catalyst, they can access what's called the Goddess's Wrath, a power that can kill other shifters instantly, regardless of their strength or alpha status." "That sounds terrifying." "It is. It's also why the Council wanted you contained, why Marcus is willing to risk everything to possess you. A Moonborn who can channel the Goddess's Wrath is essentially unstoppable." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "How do I access it?" "Usually through extreme emotional trauma. Watching someone you love die, being tortured, having your mate bond severed against your will." Kale's expression was grave. "It's not something you can just call up, Elena. It's a last resort. And it often kills the Moonborn who uses it. But I could save Lila and her baby with it." "Elena, no. Promise me you won't try to force that power to manifest." The risk is mine to take," she said firmly. "Those are innocent lives, Kale. A mother and her newborn child. If I have the power to save them, then I have the responsibility to try." As evening approached, they made their way toward the old Blackthorn territory, a section of ancient forest that had been abandoned after Marcus's pack was decimated in a territorial war 5 years ago. The trees here were older, darker, twisted by decades of violence and bloodshed. Elena could sense the wrongness in the air, the way the very earth seemed poisoned by the atrocities committed on it. Her newly awakened senses recoiled from the malevolent energy that permeated every shadow. "He's here," Kale murmured, his nostrils flaring, along with at least a dozen others, beta and gamma level shifters, all loyal to him. "Where are Lila and the baby?" Kyle closed his eyes, extending his senses. "Old cabin about 1/2 mile north. I can hear the baby crying." Elena's heart clenched. "She's probably hungry, terrified. We have to get to them." "We will." Kale's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "But Elena, if something goes wrong, if it looks like we're going to lose, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Run. Don't try to save me, don't look back. Just run and keep running until you're safe." Elena met his golden gaze steadily. "I promise I'll do whatever is necessary to protect the people I love." It wasn't the promise he'd asked for, but it was the only one she could give. They moved through the forest like ghosts, using every skill Kale had taught her to avoid detection. But as they approached the cabin where Lila was being held, Elena realized with growing horror that Marcus had planned for their stealth. The clearing around the cabin was filled with shifters, more than the dozen Kale had initially sensed. They stood in a perfect circle, trapping the cabin in the center like some twisted ritual formation. And in the middle of it all stood Marcus Blackthorn, holding Lila's crying baby in his arms. "Welcome, Kale," Marcus called out, his voice carrying clearly through the night air. "And the lovely Elena, of course. I was wondering when you'd arrive." They had no choice but to step into the clearing. Elena's heart hammered as she saw Lila tied to a chair near the cabin door, blood staining her shirt, her face pale with pain and terror. "Let them go, Marcus," Kale commanded, his alpha power rolling across the clearing like thunder. "Your quarrel is with me." Marcus laughed, the sound chilling in its complete lack of sanity. "Oh, but that's where you're wrong, old friend. My quarrel is with the natural order that says a nobody like Elena gets to possess power that should belong to a true alpha bloodline. She's not yours to claim," Elena said, stepping forward despite Kale's restraining hand on her arm. "Neither of them are." "Isn't she, though?" Marcus shifted the baby to one arm and pulled out a silver blade with the other. "Ancient law is quite clear about unmated moonborns. They belong to whoever is strong enough to claim them." The baby's cries intensified, and Elena felt something snap inside her chest. "Put her down. Now. Or what?" Marcus pressed the tip of the blade against the infant's tiny arm, drawing a drop of blood. "You'll heal her afterwards?" How touching. Elena's vision went white with rage. The baby's scream of pain echoed through her bones, and suddenly every cell in her body was on fire with silver light. Power erupted from her like a tsunami, washing over the clearing with devastating force. Every shifter except Cale and Marcus dropped to their knees, clutching their heads and howling in agony. Trees groaned and cracked under the pressure of her unleashed energy. The very air seemed to burn with moonlight. "Impossible," Marcus breathed, but his grip on the baby loosened in shock. That moment of weakness was all Cale needed. He launched himself across the clearing in a blur of motion, tackling Marcus and sending the baby flying through the air, directly toward Elena. Time seemed to slow as Elena caught the tiny, precious bundle, her power automatically shifting from destructive to protective, wrapping the infant in healing warmth. But the effort of controlling such massive energy, while simultaneously healing, was too much. Elena felt her strength drain away like water through broken glass. The silver light flickered and died, and she collapsed to her knees, the baby still safe in her arms. "Elena!" Cale's roar of rage echoed through the forest as Marcus's blade found its mark, silver piercing through Cale's side as they fought. The great alpha, brought low by his pathetic attachment to a mongrel. Marcus snarled, twisting the blade deeper. "She'll watch you die, and then she'll be mine to break and rebuild as I see fit." Elena looked up at Lila, who was staring at her with desperate hope, then at Cale, whose golden eyes were dimming as silver poisoned his system. Finally, her gaze settled on Marcus, whose face was twisted with triumph and madness. "You're right about one thing," Elena said quietly, her voice carrying despite her exhaustion. "I am powerful. More powerful than you could ever imagine." She stood slowly, still cradling the baby, and Elena felt the last of her fears fall away like discarded chains. "But you made one crucial mistake, Marcus." "What's that, little girl?" Elena smiled, and it was full of moonlight and ancient fury. "You hurt my family." The goddess's wrath erupted from her a second time, but this time it was focused, precise, deadly. Silver fire flowed from her directly toward Marcus, seeking him out like a living thing. His scream cut off abruptly as the power struck him, and Elena watched with grim satisfaction as the man who had terrorized her for 8 years simply ceased to exist. The silence that followed was absolute. Elena swayed on her feet, the baby still secure in her arms, and looked around the clearing. The other shifters were unconscious, but alive. Lila was crying with relief. And Kyle? Kyle was pulling the silver blade from his side with shaking hands, already healing now that the immediate threat was gone. "It's over," Elena whispered. And then the world went black as her body finally succumbed to the massive expenditure of power. The last thing she felt was Cale's arms catching her as she fell, his voice rough with emotion as he whispered her name. She had saved them all, but at what cost? Chapter 6. The Price of Power. Elena drifted in and out of consciousness for 3 days, her body struggling to recover from channeling the goddess's wrath. When awareness finally returned fully, she found herself in an unfamiliar bedroom, sunlight streaming through gauze curtains and the scent of healing herbs thick in the air. "You're awake." The voice belonged to an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes, who was sitting beside the bed. "I'm Dr. Miriam Thorne, the pack healer. You've been unconscious for 72 hours. Elena tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as the room spun violently. "Lila, the baby, are they—" "Safe and healthy, thanks to you." Dr. Thorne gently pressed Elena back against the pillows. "The little one doesn't even have a scar from where Marcus cut her. Your healing abilities protected her completely during the fight." Relief flooded through Elena, followed immediately by a desperate need to see Cale. "Where is he? Is he all right?" Dr. Thorne's expression grew concerned. "He's alive. But Elena, using the goddess's wrath twice in one night. It nearly killed you both." "What do you mean, both?" "You're bonded to him, dear. When you channeled that much power while injured and exhausted, the overflow went through your mate connection. Cale absorbed some of the backlash to keep it from destroying you completely." Elena's heart clenched with guilt. "Is he hurt because of me?" "He's recovering, but it will take time. The amount of raw energy that flowed through your bond was..." Unprecedented. Most mated pairs wouldn't have survived it. I need to see him. Dr. Thorne studied her for a moment, then nodded. I think that might actually help both of you. But you're not walking anywhere yet. 20 minutes later, Elena found herself in a wheelchair being pushed down a hallway toward another bedroom. Her legs felt like jelly, and her hands shook with residual weakness, but none of that mattered when she saw Cale. He was lying unconscious in a large bed, his face pale and drawn with pain even in sleep. Bandages covered his torso where Marcus's silver blade had found its mark, and she could see the faint silver tracery of energy burns along his arms, marks left by their bond when her power had overwhelmed them both. "Oh, Cale," Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry." Dr. Thorne positioned Elena's wheelchair beside the bed and quietly withdrew, leaving them alone. Elena reached out with trembling fingers to touch Cale's hand, and the moment their skin made contact, she felt the mate bond pulse weakly between them. His golden eyes fluttered open, immediately finding her face. "Elena, thank the goddess. You're awake. Don't try to move," she said quickly, as he attempted to sit up. "Dr. Thorne said you're healing from energy backlash because of me." "Because of us," he corrected firmly, his fingers intertwining with hers. "We're bonded, little flower. What affects you affects me, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But if I hadn't used so much power, then Marcus would have killed that baby, murdered Lila, and probably me as well. You did what had to be done." His thumb traced over her knuckles. "Though I'll admit, watching you channel the goddess's wrath was the most terrifying and magnificent thing I've ever witnessed." Elena felt heat flow between their joined hands, her healing abilities automatically responding to his injuries. "What happened after I collapsed? I remember saving the baby and Marcus, disappearing. But everything after that is blank." Cale's expression darkened. The other shifters in his pack surrendered immediately once they realized Marcus was dead, and you'd displayed moonborn powers. Most of them were coerced into following him anyway. He had something on all of them. Threats against their families or mates. And the Council of Ancients? If they wanted me before, what happens now that I've killed an alpha? That's complicated. Cale shifted carefully in the bed, wincing slightly. Marcus's death technically violated several supernatural laws, but the circumstances were extreme. Threatening a newborn, attacking a mated alpha, attempting to force claim a bonded moonborn. The council is calling it justifiable homicide. Elena felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. "So I'm not going to be arrested or executed?" "No, but there are consequences. The council has demanded a formal hearing about your abilities and your future role in the supernatural community. They're arriving tomorrow." Fear spiked through Elena. "They still want to study me, don't they? To control me? They want to understand you." Cale said carefully, "What you did 3 nights ago has never been recorded in our history. A moonborn channeling the goddess's wrath twice in one night, maintaining fine control over healing abilities while simultaneously wielding destructive power. Elena, you're not just rare. You might be unique." Elena pulled her hand away from his, suddenly feeling trapped despite being in a wheelchair. "I don't want to be unique. I just want to be normal, to have a quiet life with you and your pack." "I know." Cale's voice was gentle but honest. "But after what happened, after what you demonstrated, I don't think that's an option anymore. The entire supernatural world knows about you now." Before Elena could respond, a commotion in the hallway made them both look toward the door. Dr. Thorne appeared, her face tight with concern. "Alpha, Luna, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. There are vehicles approaching the territory, official council cars. They're not supposed to arrive until tomorrow." Cale was immediately alert, his alpha instincts overriding his physical weakness. "How many?" 6 cars, at least 20 people. And Alpha, one of the Sense My Scouts reported. Dr. Thorne hesitated. "Elena, they say your parents are with them." Elena's world tilted. "My parents? Why would they be with the council?" "I don't know," Cale said grimly, already trying to get out of bed despite his injuries. "But we need to be ready for whatever this is." "You're not going anywhere," Elena said firmly, using her own alpha authority for the first time. The command in her voice surprised all 3 of them. You can barely sit up, and I won't have you making your injuries worse." Kale stared at her in amazement. "Elena, did you just use Alpha Command on an Alpha?" "Apparently." Elena felt as surprised as he looked. "But the point stands. Dr. Thorne, can we receive visitors here? I want to face whatever this is together." 20 minutes later, Elena found herself back in her wheelchair beside Kale's bed, both of them as presentable as their injuries allowed. The door opened to admit 3 figures that made Elena's heart race with confused emotions. Her parents entered first. Margaret and Samuel Hartwell, looking older and more careworn than she remembered. Behind them came a woman Elena had never seen before. Tall, elegant, with silver hair and eyes that seemed ancient, despite her relatively young appearance. "Elena," her mother whispered, tears streaming down her face. "My darling girl, when we heard what happened, what are you doing here?" Elena asked, her voice carefully controlled. "Why are you with the council?" It was her father who answered, his voice heavy with years of hidden pain. "Because it's time you knew the truth about who you really are, and who we really are." The silver-haired woman stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. "Elena Hartwell, I am Counselor Lydia Moonwhisper. I believe it's time you learned about your true heritage." Elena felt Kale tense beside her, and she reached for his hand instinctively. "What true heritage? My parents already told me I'm a Moonborn." "That's only part of the story," Counselor Moonwhisper said, her ancient eyes studying Elena intently. "You're not just any Moonborn child. You're the last direct descendant of the Moon Goddess herself." The silence that followed was deafening. Elena stared at the counselor, then at her parents, then back again. "That's impossible. Your father isn't Samuel Hartwell," her mother said quietly, fresh tears falling. "He's Samuel Moonborn, last prince of the original Moonborn bloodline. He was placed in hiding 25 years ago when the last of our people were hunted to near extinction." Elena's grip on Kyle's hand tightened until her knuckles were white. "You lied to me my entire life? We protected you," her father, Samuel, said desperately. "The Moonborn line was thought to be completely destroyed. If anyone had known you existed, had known what you were capable of, they would have tried to use you as a weapon," Counselor Moonwhisper finished. "Or kill you to prevent that possibility. Your parents chose exile and lies to keep you safe." Elena felt like she was drowning in revelations. "So what does this mean? What changes now that you know what I am?" "Everything," the counselor said simply. "As the last true Moonborn, you have a choice to make. The council can offer you protection, training, a place among the ruling families of our people. You would be revered, honored, given everything you could ever want. In exchange for what? Your freedom," Kale said quietly. Understanding immediately, they want you to come with them, to take your place in their hierarchy. Counselor Moonwhisper nodded. "You would be too valuable to risk in normal pack life. Your abilities, your bloodline, your potential children, all of it would need to be carefully managed for the good of our species." Elena looked around the room at all the expectant faces, then down at her hands that had channeled the power of a goddess. The same hands that had healed Kale's injuries and saved a baby's life. The same hands that had ended Marcus Blackthorn's reign of terror. "And if I refuse, then you remain here, unprotected, with every enemy our people have ever made eventually finding their way to your door. The knowledge of what you are is already spreading, Elena. By next week, every supernatural faction in North America will know your name." Elena felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. Everything she had gained, Kale, her sense of belonging, her newfound strength, was about to be taken away by the very heritage that had given it to her. She looked at Kale, seeing her own heartbreak reflected in his golden eyes. They had found each other only to discover that forces beyond their control were determined to tear them apart. "How long do I have to decide?" she asked quietly. "Until moonrise tomorrow," Counselor Moonwhisper replied. "The full moon will amplify your abilities, make you even more powerful. If you're going to choose the Council's protection, it needs to happen under the moon's influence." As the delegation withdrew to give Elena time to consider, she found herself alone with Kale and the impossible choice that would determine both their futures. Tomorrow night, under the full moon, She would have to choose between safety and love, between destiny and desire. And whatever she chose would change everything forever. Chapter 7. Under the Moon's Blessing. The full moon hung heavy and silver in the night sky as Elena stood at the edge of the sacred clearing where generations of Shadowpine Pact ceremonies had taken place. Ancient stones formed a perfect circle, their surfaces carved with symbols that seemed to glow with inner light under the moon's touch. Tonight, this place would witness either the most joyous or most heartbreaking moment of her life. Kale stood beside her, his injuries mostly healed thanks to their shared bond and her healing abilities. He wore ceremonial robes of deep forest green, and despite the gravity of their situation, Elena's breath caught at how magnificent he looked. Every inch the powerful alpha she had fallen in love with. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly, his golden eyes reflecting the moonlight. "If you choose the Council's protection, I'll understand. I won't make this harder for you than it already is." Elena turned to face him fully, her own white ceremonial gown rustling in the night breeze. "Do you remember what you told me the first night we met? That I needed to find my own strength before I could truly choose my path." "Elena, I've found it, Kale. My strength isn't in my moonborn abilities or my healing powers, or even in channeling the goddess's wrath. It's in knowing exactly what I'm willing to fight for." She took his hands in hers, feeling the familiar warmth of their bond pulse between them. "I'm willing to fight for you, for us, for the right to choose love over duty." The sound of approaching footsteps made them both turn. Counselor Moonwhisper emerged from the tree line, flanked by 6 other council members and Elena's parents. Their faces were grave, but Elena thought she detected a hint of anticipation in the counselor's ancient eyes. "Elena Moonborn," the counselor intoned formally. "Have you made your decision?" "I have." Elena's voice rang clear and strong across the clearing. "I choose to remain here, with my mate, with the pack that has become my family. I reject the Council's offer of protection." Gasps echoed from several council members, but Counselor Moonwhisper merely nodded. "I expected as much. You have your father's stubborn streak and your bloodline's fierce independence." "Then you'll let us be?" Kale asked, his voice carefully controlled. "I'm afraid it's not that simple." Another council member spoke up, a severe-looking man with cold gray eyes. "Counselor Aldrich Grimm." He introduced himself with a slight bow. "The council cannot simply allow the last Moonborn to remain unprotected and unguided. If you will not come willingly, other arrangements must be made." Elena felt ice form in her stomach. "What kind of arrangements?" "The ancient laws are clear," Counselor Grimm continued. "A Moonborn of your power cannot be allowed to roam freely without proper oversight. If you insist on remaining here, this territory and everyone in it becomes the Council's responsibility. We will establish a permanent presence, monitor your activities, and ensure that your abilities are not misused." "You want to turn our home into a prison," Kyle said, his alpha power beginning to leak into his voice. "We want to ensure the safety of our people," Counselor Grimm replied coldly. Elena's display of power 3 nights ago was unprecedented. She killed an alpha with a thought, held devastating energy while simultaneously healing, and survived channeling the goddess's wrath twice. That level of power requires supervision. Elena felt her own power beginning to stir in response to the threat. "And if I refuse that supervision as well? Then we invoke the ancient laws and remove you by force," Counselor Grimm said simply. "Your choice, child. Willing cooperation or compulsory relocation." The clearing fell silent except for the whisper of wind through the ancient stones. Elena looked around at the faces surrounding her. Council members who saw her as a weapon to be controlled. Parents who had spent 24 years lying to protect her. And Kale, whose golden eyes reflected nothing but love and unwavering faith in her. "There is another option," Counselor Moonwhisper said quietly, breaking the tense silence. "Though it hasn't been used in over 2 centuries. All eyes turned to her. "What option?" Elena asked. "The goddess trial," the elderly counselor replied. "In the old days, when the council and a Moonborn could not reach agreement, the matter could be put before the moon goddess herself for judgment." Counselor Grimm looked alarmed. "Lydia, that ritual is considered mythical at best. suicidal at worst. No one has attempted a goddess trial since my great-grandmother successfully used it to establish the modern council structure. Counselor Moonwhisper finished calmly. The ritual is dangerous, yes, but it is also binding. If Elena can successfully complete the trial and gain the goddess's blessing for her chosen path, the council must accept her decision permanently. Elena's heart began to race. What does the trial involve? You must open yourself completely to the moon goddess's power, allowing her to judge your heart, your intentions, and your worthiness to make this choice. If she finds you worthy, you and your mate will be blessed with protection that even the council cannot override. If she finds you lacking, Counselor Moonwhisper paused meaningfully. The power will consume you completely. Absolutely not, Kale said immediately. Elena, you nearly died 3 days ago from channeling too much power. This could kill you. But if I succeed, we're free, Elena said, her voice filled with growing determination. No council oversight, no forced relocation, no one trying to control us or use me as a weapon. If you survive, her father spoke for the first time since entering the clearing. Elena, the goddess trial isn't just about power. It strips away every defense, every barrier between your soul and the raw energy of creation itself. Very few beings can withstand that level of exposure. Elena looked up at the full moon hanging overhead, feeling its light call to something deep in her blood. But I'm not just any being, am I? I'm the last direct descendant of the moon goddess herself. If anyone can survive her judgment, shouldn't it be me? The bloodline connection might protect you, Counselor Moonwhisper admitted, or it might make the experience even more intense. There's no way to know until you attempt it. Kale stepped in front of Elena, his expression desperate. There has to be another way. Some compromise we haven't considered. The council's position is non-negotiable, Counselor Grimm said firmly. Either Elena submits to our authority, or she undergoes the trial. Those are the only options. Elena placed her hand on Kyle's chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palm. What would you do if our positions were reversed? If someone was trying to force you to choose between your freedom and my safety? Kyle closed his eyes, pain written across his features. I'd fight for both, even if it killed me. Then you understand why I have to try this. Elena, please. I love you, she said simply, her voice carrying absolute conviction. I love you enough to risk everything for the chance to build a life with you, to have children with you, to grow old beside you without anyone else controlling our destiny. Tears shimmered in Kale's golden eyes. And I love you enough to support whatever choice you make, even if it terrifies me. Elena turned to face Counselor Moonwhisper. What do I need to do? The ritual must be performed in the center of the stone circle, directly under the moon's light. You'll need to remove all barriers between yourself and the goddess's power, physical, mental, and spiritual. Your mate can anchor you to this realm through your bond, but the trial itself you must face alone. Elena nodded, already moving toward the center of the clearing. How will we know if it's working? Trust me, child. When the moon goddess touches your soul directly, there will be no question. Elena reached the center of the stone circle and turned to look back at Kale one more time. He stood at the edge of the sacred space, his hands clenched at his sides, love and terror warring in his expression. If something goes wrong, Elena called to him, if the power starts to consume me, promise me you'll let me go. Don't try to save me at the cost of your own life. Never, Kale replied immediately. We live together, or we die together. That's what being mates means. Elena smiled, feeling more loved and supported than she ever had in her life. Then let's live together. She closed her eyes, lifted her face to the moon, and opened every barrier she possessed. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Silver light crashed into her like a tsunami, and suddenly Elena wasn't just Elena anymore. She was connected to every moonborn who had ever lived, every wolf who had ever howled at the moon, every force of nature that had ever been touched by lunar power. Child of my blood, a voice spoke directly into her mind. Ancient, feminine, infinitely powerful. You would challenge the order your people have established? I would choose love over fear, Elena replied, her consciousness floating in an ocean of moonlight. I would choose freedom over safety, trust over control, even knowing the dangers, even understanding what your refusal might cost others. Images flashed through Elena's mind, potential futures where her uncontrolled power destroyed cities, where enemies used her abilities for conquest, where her children inherited abilities that drove them mad with their intensity. Even knowing all of that, Elena said firmly, because I also see the other possibilities, the future where my healing abilities save thousands of lives, where my children grow up free to choose their own paths, where love proves stronger than fear. The presence in her mind seemed to smile. You have your ancestors' courage, child, and your mate's loyalty anchors you to what truly matters. Elena felt the goddess's attention turn toward Kale, and through their bond, she sensed him being examined, judged, weighed in cosmic scales she couldn't comprehend. He would die for you, the goddess observed. But more importantly, he would live for you. He sees your power and does not seek to control it. He sees your independence and celebrates it rather than fearing it. He's my other half, Elena agreed. My anchor and my wings, all at once. Then receive my blessing, daughter, and know that no earthly authority can override what I have sanctified. Power erupted through Elena like liquid starlight, but this time it didn't feel destructive or overwhelming. Instead, it felt like coming home, like every cell in her body recognizing its true nature and celebrating. When the light faded and Elena opened her eyes, she found herself transformed. Her hair had taken on a silver sheen that matched the moonlight. Her eyes now held flecks of gold that mirrored Kale's, and intricate silver marks covered her arms like tattoos, the visible sign of the goddess's blessing. Kale was beside her in an instant, his hands framing her face as he stared at her in wonder. "You're magnificent," he breathed. Elena looked around the clearing to find every council member on their knees, including Counselor Grimm, whose earlier arrogance had been replaced by obvious awe. "The judgment is rendered," Counselor Moonwhisper said, her voice filled with reverence. "Elena Moonborn has been blessed by the goddess herself. Her choice to remain here, to mate with Alpha Kale Thornwood, and to live free of council oversight, is divinely sanctioned." Elena felt a completeness she had never experienced before, as if every missing piece of herself had finally fallen into place. "Does this mean we're free?" "More than free," Counselor Moonwhisper replied. "You are protected by power older than civilization itself. And now, if you're ready, I believe there's a claiming ceremony to complete." Elena looked into Kale's golden eyes and saw her entire future reflected there. Challenging, beautiful, and theirs to create together. "I'm ready," she whispered, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Under the blessing of the full moon and the watchful eyes of their allies, Elena finally stepped fully into her destiny, not as a weapon or a political tool, but as a woman choosing love. Chapter 8. Forever Under Silver Skies. 6 months later, the morning sun filtered through the gauze curtains of the Luna's quarters, casting everything in warm golden light. Elena stretched languidly in bed, her silver-marked arms catching the sunlight as she reached for the space beside her where Kale had been sleeping. Finding it empty but still warm, she smiled and followed the scent of coffee and bacon that drifted from the kitchen below. The past 6 months had transformed not just Elena's life, but the entire dynamic of the Shadowpine Pack. What had once been a traditional hierarchical structure had evolved into something more collaborative, more nurturing. Elena's healing abilities and natural empathy had drawn wolves from other packs seeking sanctuary, acceptance, and a chance to belong somewhere without judgment. "Good morning, Luna," called Sarah Brightwater, one of the newer pack members, as Elena padded barefoot into the kitchen. Sarah was a young mother who had fled an abusive pack with her 2 small children, finding refuge and healing in Elena's welcoming embrace. "Good morning, Sarah. Where's my mate gotten to so early?" Elena asked, accepting a cup of coffee gratefully. "Alpha's in the training grounds with the youngsters," Sarah replied with a grin. "Your influence on him has been remarkable to watch. 6 months ago, he was all business and dominance. Now he spends his mornings teaching cubs how to shift safely." Elena's heart swelled with pride. The claiming ceremony had changed them both, strengthening not just their bond, but their individual abilities to lead with both strength and compassion. Kale's alpha authority now carried an undertone of nurturing protection that drew wolves seeking not just security, but genuine family. "Luna Elena," a small voice called from the doorway, and Elena turned to see Tommy, Sarah's 5-year-old son, racing toward her with his 3-year-old sister Lily close behind. "What is it, sweetheart?" Elena knelt to Tommy's level, automatically checking both children for any injuries or distress with her enhanced senses. "Mama Wolf had her babies," Tommy announced excitedly. "Alpha Kale said to come get you 'cause they need healing help." Elena's pulse quickened. Mama Wolf was what the pack children called Sarah, a pregnant lone wolf who had arrived at their territory 2 weeks ago, too weak and injured to shift back to human form. Elena had been monitoring her condition carefully, knowing the birth would be complicated. "Sarah, can you—" "I'll watch the children," Sarah assured her immediately. "Go." Elena quickly dressed and made her way to the small cabin at the edge of their territory, where they housed shifters who needed medical care. She found Kyle kneeling beside a makeshift den, his voice low and soothing as he spoke to the exhausted wolf inside. "How is she?" Elena asked, moving to his side. "3 healthy pups, but she's struggling," Kyle replied quietly. "The birth took too much out of her, and she's still too weak to shift. I'm worried she won't be able to nurse them properly." Elena extended her senses toward the small family and immediately understood the problem. Sarah's body was depleted not just from the difficult birth, but from months of malnutrition and stress before finding their pack. "I can help," Elena said, already feeling her healing abilities responding to the need. "But she'll need ongoing support. This isn't something I can fix with one session." Kyle's hand found hers, their bond allowing him to lend her his strength as she worked. Over the past months, they had discovered that their combined abilities were far more powerful than either could achieve alone. Where Elena provided healing and nurturing energy, Kyle offered the steady, grounding force that kept her from overextending herself. For the next hour, Elena channeled gentle healing into the exhausted mother, carefully rebuilding her strength without overwhelming her system. Gradually, Sarah's breathing steadied, her heartbeat grew stronger, and she was able to shift back to her human form, a young woman with haunted eyes but a grateful smile. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, cradling her newborn triplets. "I was so afraid. I thought I might not be able to care for them." "You'll never have to face that fear again," Elena assured her. "Your pack now. We take care of our own." As they walked back toward the main pack house, Kale's arm around Elena's waist, she marveled at how natural this all felt. Leading alongside him, using her abilities to help others, building something beautiful and lasting together. "Penny for your thoughts, Luna," Kale murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Just thinking about how much has changed. 6 months ago, I thought I was a failed shifter with no place in the world. Now you're the most powerful Luna in North America, leading a pack that's grown by 50% because word has spread about the sanctuary we've created here," Kyle finished with obvious pride. "We've created," Elena corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." They were interrupted by the approach of a familiar figure, Dr. Miriam Thorne, carrying a medical bag and wearing an expression of barely contained excitement. "Luna Elena, Alpha Kale, I need to speak with you both privately," she said, her voice vibrating with some strong emotion. They followed her to her clinic, where Dr. Thorne gestured for Elena to sit on the examination table. "Elena, when was your last heat cycle?" Elena blinked in surprise. I'm not sure. With everything that's happened, I haven't been keeping track." "Why?" "Because your scent has changed over the past few weeks. And this morning when you were healing Sarah, I noticed something." Dr. Thorne pulled out a small device that looked like a combination stethoscope and mystical artifact. "May I?" Elena nodded, and Dr. Thorne placed the device against her abdomen. Immediately, a soft rhythmic sound filled the room, like a heartbeat, but faster and lighter than Elena's own. Kale went very still beside her. "Is that—" "Congratulations, Dr. Thorne said with a brilliant smile. "You're approximately 8 weeks pregnant. And based on what I'm hearing, I believe you're carrying twins." The world seemed to tilt around Elena. She looked at Kale, whose golden eyes had gone wide with wonder and joy so intense it took her breath away. "Twins?" Elena whispered. "But I thought, with my moon-born heritage, with how rare our bloodline is, apparently the goddess has blessed you with fertility as well as power," Dr. Thorne said gently. "Your children will be the first born to a true moonborn in over 3 centuries. They'll be remarkable." Kale's hands came up to frame Elena's face, his touch reverent. "How do you feel about this, little flower? Are you ready to be a mother?" Elena placed her hands over his, feeling the steady pulse of life within her, 2 tiny hearts beating in perfect synchrony with her own. Through their mate bond, she could sense Kale's overwhelming joy, his fierce protectiveness already extending to their unborn children, his absolute certainty that they could handle whatever challenges lay ahead. "I'm terrified," she admitted honestly, "and thrilled. And grateful. Our children will grow up knowing exactly who they are, never doubting their worth or their place in the world. They'll grow up surrounded by love." Kale agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "Protected by the strongest pack in the territory, guided by parents who chose each other freely, and blessed with abilities that will let them change the world." Dr. Thorne cleared her throat diplomatically. "I'll give you 2 some privacy to process this news. Elena, I'll want to see you weekly for monitoring. Moonborn pregnancies are uncharted territory, but everything appears healthy and normal so far." After she left, Elena and Kale sat in wondering silence, their hands resting on Elena's still flat stomach, where their children were growing. "Do you think they'll be happy here?" Elena asked quietly. "Growing up in a world where they're automatically different, powerful, watched?" "I think they'll be happy anywhere we are," Kale replied with absolute conviction. "Because they'll know they're loved unconditionally, accepted completely, and free to choose their own paths when they're ready." Elena leaned into his embrace, feeling the rightness of it settle into her bones. "I used to think my story was about finding where I belonged. But I was wrong. What's it about then?" "It's about creating where I belong," Elena said, smiling as she felt the faint flutter of movement in her womb. "About building something beautiful with the person who sees all of me and loves every part." 6 months later, as Elena cradled their newborn son and daughter, Lucas with his father's golden eyes, and Luna with silver hair that caught moonlight like spun starlight, she reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She had been abandoned at an altar by a man who couldn't handle her truth. She had been claimed by an alpha who had waited 7 years for her to find her strength. She had discovered power she never knew she possessed, and heritage that connected her to the divine. But more than any of that, she had found love. Real, honest, transformative love that had given her the courage to become who she was always meant to be. As the full moon rose over their territory, bathing their growing pack in silver light, Elena knew that her story was far from over. There would be new challenges, new adventures, new people to help and heal and welcome home. But whatever came, she would face it with Kyle at her side, their children in their arms, and their pack family surrounding them with unshakable love and loyalty. Under the eternal blessing of the moon goddess, they had found their happily ever after. The abandoned bride had become a Luna. The rejected girl had become a queen. And the broken heart had learned to love so completely that it could heal the world. And in the quiet moments between sleeping and waking, as silver moonlight painted everything in magic, Elena knew that some love stories were written in the stars themselves, destined, eternal, and absolutely worth every tear that came before the joy. The end. Elena and Kyle's love story may have reached its perfect ending, but their world is filled with so many others still searching for their own happily ever after. Broken hearts seeking healing, rejected souls yearning for acceptance, and powerful beings learning to embrace their true nature. These untold stories of passion and transformation are calling out to be shared. By not subscribing, you're missing the chance to witness other incredible journeys, leaving these beautiful souls to face their darkness alone, their voices unheard in the silence. Those who truly understand the power of love never turn their backs on others still fighting their battles. If this story resonated with your heart, let us know in the comments what touched you most deeply. We're incredibly grateful you chose to spend your time with us. Following Elena from her moment of devastating abandonment to her triumphant claiming as Luna. If you felt the magic in their bond, we have so many more tales of supernatural romance waiting. Stories where the impossible becomes possible, where love conquers ancient curses, and where destiny refuses to be denied. Don't let this be your last journey into our world of shifters, alphas, and fated mates. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you'll be the first to discover our next epic romance. We can't wait to have you back for another unforgettable adventure. Until the next full moon rises on another love story,